You wake up in a warm bed, you lock your front door, you pour a cup of coffee and pull out your phone. As you scroll through the morning news, you see headlines about borders, treaties, and international conflicts. You live in a world where organized violence between massive groups of people is a constant background noise. But imagine stepping out of your front door and walking back in time. 10,000 years, 50,000 years, 200,000 years. You would find yourself in a world without borders, without standing armies, and without wealth to steal. For the vast majority of our time on this planet, humans lived in small bands of wandering foragers. We survived not by conquering, but by cooperating. So how did we go from sharing fires in the wilderness to organizing vast armies? How did humans actually invent war? This question is one of the biggest mysteries in anthropology. It is deeply counterintuitive. Humans are naturally a social and cooperative species. If you look at our biology, we are not built like apex predators. We do not have sharp claws or massive fangs. We survived the Ice Age and dangerous predators simply because we took care of each other. Our superpower is teamwork. Yet today, organized group violence is a defining feature of human history. Some researchers estimate that for about 95% of human history, true war simply did not exist. There was interpersonal violence, sure. People got angry. Fights broke out. But war is different. War is organized. War requires a group of people to collectively agree to risk their lives to harm another group. To understand how this started, we have to look at our closest living relatives in the animal kingdom, chimpanzees. For a long time, scientists thought humans were the only animals that waged war. Then researchers observed wild chimpanzees doing something terrifying. Groups of male chimps would quietly patrol the borders of their territory. If they found a lone chimp from a rival group, they would attack. This showed us that the potential for group violence is deeply rooted in our evolutionary family tree. But early humans faced a massive challenge. Violence is incredibly risky. If you are a prehistoric hunter, a broken arm or a deep cut could easily be a death sentence. There were no hospitals. An infection from a minor spear wound would kill you. So how did early humans navigate this immense risk? They mostly avoided it. For tens of thousands of years, the world was big, and human populations were very small. If two nomadic groups did not get along, they did not fight a war. They simply walked away from each other. They had the ultimate solution to conflict. They had endless space. As long as people kept moving, there was no reason to fight over a specific patch of dirt. But eventually, the climate changed. The last ice age ended. The earth warmed up. Glaciers melted and created lush, green environments packed with wild food. This created a new challenge. What happens when a piece of land is too good to leave? Imagine a dense forest filled with fruit and a river overflowing with fish. The humans who found these places realized they did not need to follow the animal herds anymore. They could stay in one place. They built heavier shelters. They started storing extra food in pits. This completely changed the social dynamic. When you have a stockpile of dried fish and a permanent village, you lose your ultimate defense. You can no longer just walk away. If a hungry or aggressive group comes into your valley, running away means giving up your food, your home, and your survival. They solved this by standing their ground. Archaeologists excavating ancient lake beds in northern Africa have found graveyards that date back over 10,000 years. These sites show dozens of skeletons with stone arrowheads stuck in their bones. Many of them were buried together in a mass grave. This is not the result of a simple argument. This is evidence of a coordinated attack. This is the birth of the battlefield. Once humans started standing their ground, a new psychological challenge emerged. How do you convince an individual to risk being killed for the sake of the group? If you run away, you might live. If you fight, you might die. Human societies solve this through culture. We used our amazing capacity for language and belief to create strong group identities. We invented tribal marks, specific clothing, and distinct languages. We created the concept of us versus them. We started telling stories that glorified bravery and shamed cowardice. To protect the village, society had to reward the warrior. The people who fought for the group were given status and respect. This was a brilliant adaptation for survival, but it had a dark side. It made it much easier to dehumanize the people on the other side of the river. Imagine a typical day in one of these early settled villages. The sun rises over a beautiful valley. The air smells like wood smoke and damp earth. You wake up on a woven mat inside a circular hut. You step outside and hear the sounds of your community. Children are playing near the river. Women are grinding wild seeds on flat stones. Men are fixing fishing nets. It is a peaceful, predictable life. Your people have lived in this exact spot for generations. The storehouses are full. But then the dogs start barking at the edge of the woods. A scout runs into the village, breathing heavily. He says a large group of strangers is coming down the ridge. They look starving. They are carrying long wooden spears. Panic ripples through the camp. You look at your family. You look at the food you spent all summer gathering. You know that if you leave, winter will kill you. So you do something your nomadic ancestors rarely had to do. You grab a weapon. You stand shoulder to shoulder with your neighbors. You form a line at the edge of the village. The strangers step out of the trees. The shouting begins. Then the first stone is thrown. In a matter of minutes, the peaceful valley turns into a scene of chaos. You are no longer just a hunter or a gatherer. You are a soldier defending your home. This kind of tribal skirmish went on for thousands of years. But the true turning point, the event that changed the scale of war forever, was the invention of farming. Agriculture completely rewrote the rules of human existence. When we planted wheat and domesticated animals, our populations exploded. We went from villages of 50 people to cities of thousands. We created massive surpluses of grain. But farming is hard work. It ties you to a very specific piece of dirt. If a drought ruins the crops in the next valley, the people living there are going to look at your full grain silos with desperate eyes. Agriculture created true wealth, and wealth created a massive challenge. It became a magnet for theft. How do you protect a massive city full of resources? The solution was monumental. Humans started building giant stone walls around their cities. They invented specialized weapons made of bronze and later iron that were designed specifically for killing humans, not hunting animals. A hunting spear is meant to be thrown at a deer. A heavy bronze sword is meant to break through a wooden shield. We were no longer adapting tools for violence. We were inventing military technology. More importantly, the farming surplus allowed society to feed people who did not farm. This meant you could create a professional class of warriors. You could have kings and generals. War was no longer a desperate fight for survival between hungry tribes. It became an institution. It became an industry. Kings realized that the easiest way to get richer was not to farm more land, but to conquer the neighbors and take theirs. War became a tool for political power. The invention of agriculture was the exact moment that humans strapped themselves onto a runaway train of organized conflict. With standing armies and kings in place, the challenge shifted again. How do you manage a constantly expanding empire? Early states realized that war could pay for itself. A victorious army brings back captured resources, new land, and enslaved people. This fueled further expansion. To maintain this system, rulers had to solve the problem of logistics and morale. They built roads to move troops faster. They invented complex supply chains to feed soldiers hundreds of miles from home. They used religion and propaganda to convince farmers to march into battle for a king they had never even met. They created a culture where military conquest was the highest possible glory. Human intelligence, The exact same intelligence that taught us how to share food and care for the sick was now being used to design siege engines and battle formations. We turned our greatest strength, our ability to cooperate in huge numbers, into our most destructive weapon. The organization that allowed us to build pyramids and aqueducts was the exact same organization that allowed us to march thousands of men to their deaths. As centuries passed, technology evolved, but the underlying psychology never really changed. The bronze swords turned into steel blades, the steel blades turned into muskets, the muskets turned into artillery. The scale of devastation grew to unimaginable levels, but the core reasons for conflict remained tied to those ancient roots: resources, territory, group identity, and power. We built global systems of trade and diplomacy to try and contain it. We created international laws to try and civilize it, but the machinery of war is still woven into the fabric of our modern nations. It is a haunting realization that the capacity for total destruction comes from the same evolutionary traits that allowed us to build civilization in the first place. Today, you can fly across the world in hours. You can talk to a stranger on another continent instantly. You live in a web of global cooperation that our ancient ancestors could never comprehend. Yet, we still draw imaginary lines in the dirt, and we still build machines to defend them. We are a species capable of profound empathy, locked in a system built on ancient fears. We did not invent war because we are purely evil. We invented war because we learned how to love our own group so fiercely that we forgot how to see the humanity in anyone else.